Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast, presented by Fantasy Data. Here's your hosts, Billy Muzio and Bradley Stalder.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast presented by Fantasy Data. Billy Muzio here with Bradley Stalder, and tonight we have special guest on, Aaron Reiss from the Houston Texans. He's a beat writer from The Athletic, and we're going to be answering questions here. All of us want to know, who is going to be starting here week one? What's happening to Deshaun Watson? Who's the running back two here in this Texans offense? Who's the wide receiver two here in this Texans offense? And why the hell did they cut Chad Hansen? So all these questions will be coming up here on the show. Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to talk through it. It's been, there's been a lot going on, and I think, it's funny. I've had people I work with, obviously, with some fantasy coverage at The Athletic, and some people there are always asking me, like, who do you think is going to take these carries at running back or this? Like, I feel like maybe no team has more fantasy questions because there's so much kind of unknown about the roster.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we're doing our projections here, and this was one of the hardest teams for me to project, at least. I've kept finding myself, how many games do I project for Watson? Is he even going to play for this team? I have to at least slide him in currently right now for, I think I did 7 games. I think I gave him a 10-game suspension. And then I started looking at the running back depth. I'm like, oh, this is tricky as well. Get to the wide receiver core. I'm like, oh, this is ugly. And I start wondering, how is this going to break down? I mean, it's one of the lowest points totals we've seen in Vegas history, and win totals we've seen in Vegas history with these Texans. And I'm interested to see how this dynamic unfolds as the season kind of unwinds.
You were about to say excited, and then I think you.
Yeah. I mean, football's exciting in general, just all the way around. So whether it's an 0-16 team or 0-17 team now, or if it's a 17-0 team, I'm excited either way. I love football.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, let's kick it off with everyone is asking Deshaun Watson. Aaron, can you talk to us about what to make of this situation? Like, we remember earlier in the offseason, he said he wouldn't even play for the Texans. He wanted to be traded, and there were a lot of suitors. It seemed like news has cooled recently, obviously because of the countless allegations made against him, but there's not been a lot of news in like the last month or so. How do we read this? What's the % chance Watson plays a snap for the Texans this season?
Yeah. I mean, I think the news has slowed down just because it was kind of the attorney who was suing him, Tony Busby, is pretty smart with kind of the media, and I think he made sure that a lot of allegations came out day after day after day, and kind of own the story for a while, or kept people's attention on the topic. And naturally, it's going to quiet down a little bit, and they have signed an NDA that if they were in any kind of settlement discussions, they're not supposed to be discussing it. But I think to get to your main question, will he play a snap for the Texans? I would be surprised. I think his time just in Houston is done. Whether he is put on the commissioner's exempt list for the whole season or he's suspended, whatever. I think what you've seen over the course of the offseason is the team is clearly kind of moving on from him. I mean, he is not pictured in any of the highlight videos. It's hard to find him on the website. And David Culley has basically come out and said Tyrod Taylor is doing everything to be his week one starter. So the team has, basically acknowledged Tyrod is going to be the week one starter without, all completely saying it because of the situation Deshaun is in. But no one really expects that Deshaun is going to be playing for this team this year. I
mean, follow the money. They paid Tyrod Taylor more than Andy Dalton, was paid by the Chicago Bears.
Right. You don't pay a guy that is sort of incentive-laden contract unless you think there's at least a pretty good chance he's going to play. And then obviously, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, you don't then use your first pick in the draft on a quarterback, even if it is in the 3rd round, if you think there's a chance that Deshaun Watson is coming back.
And so that was my follow-up question here. If Deshaun Watson does not play, and he is on the exempt list, and we see Tyrod Taylor, do you think that we see Davis Mills here at any point during the season? And if so, what week are you projecting?
Yeah, I think you have to, right? Just because you think this team potentially is going to have a top 5 pick going into next offseason. They need to know if there's a chance that Davis Mills is a franchise quarterback, and if he is, that what that affords you a whole bunch of options and what you could do with that pick. History would say he probably will not be, but you need to use this year to evaluate it. I don't expect it would be early on. They'll have time to do it. I think you're probably going to at least have Tyrod Taylor start the first half of the season, is my guess. Assuming he stays healthy, which has been kind of a problem for him in some of these more recent jobs when he's been starting in front of a rookie. But I would expect this team probably wants Tyrod Taylor at least start the first half of the season. But at some point, no matter what the record is, I would expect that. Or I guess I shouldn't say no matter what. It's assuming the record is what we think it will be. I imagine that towards the end of the season, Davis Mills will be starting games.
So if Tyrod Taylor is the starting quarterback for at least the majority of the season, if that's what we're projecting, how does that affect? How do you think it affects the primary other players involved? Primarily David Johnson and Brandon Cooks. We'll hit on those two players.
Yeah, I think David Johnson is very interesting to me because he had his worst year as a receiver last year with the Texans, and so. Part of what you get from answers from coaches or from the Texans themselves is like, oh, well, there's a lot of options on the team, which was at least pretty true for the first half of last year, right? I mean, you had Will Fuller on the team, you had Brandon Cooks on the team, they still had Kenny Stills at some point, and Randall Cobb. And then, later on they had Chad Hansen, who was pretty good, T too. So they had a ton of options. And so, and Deshaun had never really been a guy who targeted running backs in the passing game, which you could make an argument that probably maybe we shouldn't have ever traded for David Johnson then, but they did. I think maybe you might have a few more targets for David Johnson this year with Tyrod Taylor. And I say that mostly because they just don't have a lot of other options. This is a team that you have Brandon Cooks, and then you have Randall Cobb, who's maybe kind of average, definitely overpaid, but at least, a serviceable player. But then who the third wide receiver is pretty much up in the air. So I think just naturally you're going to see David Johnson get a larger target share. And Brandon Cooks, I think is a guy who he could have a huge year. Defenses will zone in on him or key in on him specifically because there really isn't anyone else to generate much attention. But this is a guy who had career high yards per route run last year. Obviously that was with with Deshaun Watson. But I think it's somewhat similar to last year's Texans team. This one is probably going to be trailing a lot. You're going to have a lot of opportunities for him to be catching passes, and there's not really anyone else for Tyrod Taylor to target downfield.
So what you're saying is this team needs a wide receiver one like DeAndre Hopkins.
That'd be good. That'd be a good addition. Yeah.
So I had to. I'm sorry. Okay.
Well, behind David Johnson, the Texans went out and signed a flurry of running backs who had a lot of other experience. Phillip Lindsay, most recently on Denver. Mark Ingram, cut from the Baltimore Ravens. Rex Burkhead, recovering from an ACL injury on the Patriots. Are there any? Who's the most interesting behind Johnson? And is this going to be like a three-headed committee or more or less? How is this pegging out in July 13th?
Yeah, a lot of experience is a nice way to talk about two running backs who are on the wrong side of 30. I would be surprised if you have Johnson, Ingram, Burkhead, and Lindsay all four getting carries, right? It just doesn't really seem super realistic, especially when, again, we're talking about a team that probably is going to be trailing a lot. Probably is not going to be running the ball super frequently. Me personally, I think Lindsay is the most interesting just because he's the youngest. It's not that far removed from him being a good player. He had a down year last year, but he at least offers some upside. That to me is kind of the big issue with the Ingram and Burkhead signings is I don't really understand what the upside is there, right? Ingram, especially, Burkhead at least plays some special teams. I think what you're seeing, though, is that basically the Texans have said they want to create competition. This seems much more about a sort of culture-building year one of a new regime sort of move of let's bring in a bunch of veterans who may be good presence in the locker room, and we're betting on that more than upside seems to kind of be their sort of philosophy. I would argue you could create competition by bringing in a late round draft pick or an undrafted running back. They traded away 3 late round picks to move up in the draft, which was a bit surprising. But so I would guess that it's probably going to be Johnson will get most of the carries. You brought him back on a restructured deal that doubled his guaranteed money. He's not going anywhere. Burkhead probably provides value on special teams and has some familiarity with the sort of New England culture, but I don't know if he's going to be getting a ton of carries. So to me, it really comes down to is Ingram or Lindsey going to be that sort of number 2 person? Because neither of them really have a ton of special teams experience. So I think you're probably talking about one of them maybe getting a job. I would go with Lindsey, but the problem is that it's hard to really, with this team, it's hard to know what they're thinking, because I think this whole spiel I just gave you about running backs would be the reason you would say, I don't really know. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So maybe, they're thinking on who to keep or whatever will also not match up with convention.
So about a month and a half ago, Bradley actually projected Mark Ingram to lose the job and be cut prior to week 1. It sounds like, based upon your testament here, that you would maybe agree with that you think Lindsey would be the one to hold the job over Ingram if push came to shove.
Yeah, I think so. But again, I think the whole plan is kind of a little bit of a head scratcher. So it's like you gotta say, we don't necessarily know how this team is going to act, even if it doesn't necessarily line up with our way of thinking. But to me, that is the most logical move. Yeah.
So you mentioned that the Texans brought in a lot of veteran players for competition, right? And the word competition begins with the letters C and O. And I think that that's also the philosophy they took with the wide receiver core. Cooks, Cobb, and QT, and Collins, and Coulter, and Conley.
That's why I had to go.
Yeah, they are all competitors. I was waiting for all of that. But there's also Stephen Mitchell, Alex Erickson, Andre Roberts, Taywan Taylor, Dante Moncrief, Chris Moore. Like, it feels like the Texans signed anybody and everybody. I know they're trying to build up this competition, but are there, aside from Cooks, like, who are the wide receiver 2 and 3s that we're looking for? And in particular, like, we're most interested, I think, in dynasty leagues for Nico Collins, given his draft pedigree and his size and all that.
You also forgot Chris Conley. Another.
Did I forget Conley? My bad. How would I?
Yeah,
shame on me.
You missed one C here, Bradley. 2 C's, Chris and Conley.
Yeah. I think you obviously in the slot they have Cobb and QT, but I think they probably will lean on Cobb for more of those touches, even if this is not the regime that chose to sign him to what looks like a pretty bad contract. At the end of the day, as kind of the running back moves show, this is an organization and a front office that believes in kind of having those veteran presence and around as they start over. So I think that you're not going to see Cobb be a guy that's going to get phased out for Kiki Kuti, who obviously does have talent, but across multiple years has been kind of unreliable and fumbles in big spots and stuff. And so I think Cobb still has an edge there. They're basically even if you go by like yards per route run or kind of more advanced stats last year. And Cobb maybe is a little more reliable when it comes to turnovers. The wide receiver 3 is, to me, one of the really interesting things about this team in the offseason or in camp is, you have Cooks, you have Cobb, but then maybe Chris Conley is the third guy. Maybe it's Alex Erickson, you mentioned, who has, I think had like 200 receiving yards for the Bengals in 16 games last year. So there is a chance for Nico Collins to step up and play right away, in my opinion. I mean, this is a team that clearly put a lot of value on him. They made a really expensive trade up in the 3rd round to go get him. And he doesn't really face super stiff competition ahead of him.
We've got some QT fans out here.
Go
ahead,
Billy.
Billy, I got to ask the question though. One more question for Aaron,
yes.
and then
wait for listener questions, because we have a slurry of them
for sure. With all of this competition, is it that they thought that Chad Hansen would blow away everybody else? Like, is that why they cut him? Because he was performing really well. He had 2 100-yard receiving games, one against the Indianapolis Colts, one of the best defenses in the NFL. It boggles my mind. At least he got a job in Detroit. But what? Any insight into my boy Chad Hansen?
No, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. I mean, that's like, it's kind of funny, but I think it does kind of point to like the sort of thing I'm talking about with the running backs, why we can't say, well, this is logical to me, so this is what's going to happen. It's like, I think this team just the past couple of years has bucked convention in a lot of ways, and so I think you just have to kind of keep that in mind whenever you're making some sort of fantasy decision as it pertains to the Houston Texans in 2021.
So if you haven't noticed, Bradley is a Hansen truther here. I mean, he owns him in like 20 dynasty leagues. You go and look at any news of him who just got re-signed, and I was just curious if he's in any of our rosters and dynasties. Like, nope, Bradley already owns him. So Bradley loves Chet Hansen. I know he was so sad when he saw him get cut, and I had to just send him a little
Billy had to
reminder.
do a pulse check for
now he's reunited. He might have a better opportunity or just as good of an opportunity in Detroit, right? Reunited with his college quarterback, and it's not like that's a particularly impressive receiving corps either.
He's got a chance, at least. Billy, I think there are a couple questions. One of them still is going to hit on the Texans. So let's talk about the tight end position.
Good question, Josh.
Yeah, so Josh asked, what do we expect from the tight end position with the departure of Fells? Because Jordan Akins is there, right? Is he going to step in, or is there any other buzz from tight ends?
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Akins was really good during the first 4 games of the season before he got knocked out with a concussion. I mean, he was leading the tight end position in snaps by a pretty wide margin. And then he got a concussion, and then Fells got a little bit better, and snaps kind of evened out. But Akins came on really strong. He was most effective kind of as a guy who, when his average target was close to the line of scrimmage, he was more of a yak guy. When they tried to use him a little more downfield, he wasn't quite as efficient. So I think he should far and away be the leader in terms of targets among that group. Behind him, you're going to have Brevin Jordan, a 5th-round pick in this draft, who I think some people kind of viewed as a bit of a steal out of Miami. Thought maybe he'd go a little bit earlier. He profiles to me kind of similar to Akins, kind of a yak guy. So to me, that is kind of more of a down-the-line guy. I mean, he's good for dynasty pickups and stuff like that, but I think they're kind of too similar to have pretty distinct roles, and obviously Akins is a little more established. He's entering the last year of his rookie contract, though, and because he played minor league baseball, he'll be 30 after this year, so I don't see him really sticking around for a second contract. Kohali Waring was a 2019 3rd-round pick who I believe has 7 targets so far in his career. Has only played in a few games, has pretty much struggled to adapt to the NFL. He should be on the bubble. Farrell Brown was a kind of find off the practice squad who was a good find for that team last year. He might have to be a little bit of a red zone threat, but only in really deep leagues. And then they traded for Ryan Izzo, as a guy on the Patriots who, he had, I think, like 150 receiving yards or something like that last year. So yeah, there isn't a ton of talent, at least in terms of receiving in the group. And to me, Akins far and away is going to get the most targets.
So follow-up question with Akins. Are we looking, do you think, like 10, 11, 12% target share in that range, or are you expecting more or less?
Maybe a little higher, just because I think that he does have some, I mean, this is a guy who was a receiver in college. He plays as much like out wide or in the slot as he does actually as a tight end. And we've already gone over kind of how there just really are not a lot of other options on this team in terms of receiving. So I think he could get a little boost and somewhat function as like a quasi wide receiver 3 at times for the team.
Okay, so we have a question here again from Josh about the offensive line. What does the O-line look like compared to last year?
You still have Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. He's basically kind of the only real like young building block this team has. Left guard and both guard spots are kind of up for competition. They brought in Justin McCray and Lane Taylor as free agents. McCray was playing right guard in OTAs, and left guard is Max Sharping, a 2019 2nd-round pick who had a pretty good rookie season, but then last year he was rotating in and out of the lineup for a veteran. Didn't really make a ton of sense. And at center, they brought in Justin Britt to replace Nick Martin, who was a cap casualty. Right tackle is kind of interesting because they traded for Marcus Cannon from the Patriots, and they've said that he's not going to move inside, but he has a cap hit of about $7 million. So he would either be a very expensive backup, or Tytus Howard, who is 2019 1st-round pick, who's played right tackle for first 2 years of his career, would be moving inside to guard. I suspect that Cannon, again, this is somewhat similar to the running back thing. I suspect that he will be kind of an expensive backup, and it might be a little bit of a head scratcher to us, but it's another sort of a culture building move as much as it's that's prioritized that over upside. But that's kind of that would be an interesting thing if they did end up moving Tytus inside.
If only they could trade Laramie Tunsil for a couple 1st-round picks.
Start restocking the roster. That'd be a good idea.
So we have one last question here. I know our time with you is limited, so we appreciate you coming on the show. Another question from Josh. Josh has a lot of interest here in the Texans. How is the defense shaping up with the loss of Watt? Who will emerge as the new defense leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say that obviously the defense is going to have less up front. Will have less top end talent. I mean, Watt was really the only guy, but they don't have him now. But I think you could argue they maybe are a little bit deeper. They have kind of a few more options of guys who have been productive as pass rushers, at least at some point in their careers, in terms of Shaq Lawson, Malik Collins. Jordan Jenkins, who was, I think had 7 sacks for the Jets only a couple of years ago. To me, the guy to watch on the defensive line is Charles Omenihu, his third-year player. He was picked in the 5th round out of UT. He actually tied Watt for the team high number of quarterback hits last year, 16. And he really only played. He was, didn't play much on early downs. I think he's going to get more of a chance to do that this year. And I think he probably is going to be the breakout player for this defense.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you coming on the show. We appreciate you coming on and spend the time with us. We try to keep it to your time limit here, and we thank you very much for you being able to give us the insight. Very eye-opening for me. I have to go through and adjust some of my projections here based upon this conversation. For instance, like I actually had Watson I at least projected for a few games because doing projections, they almost had to, right? We just don't know what's going on. But I think after this conversation, I think I'm comfortable zeroing that out and going through. And I think that Jordan Akins for me was another one. I only had about 10-11% target share. I might have to take a second look at that. But is there anything you want to throw plugs out anywhere? Where can the people find you? Anything else you want to add before you're out of here?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on Twitter at Aaron J. Reiss. My name, obviously, I see is below in that little box there, so just put a J in the middle. And you can find all my work there. And, we always have deals to subscribe to The Athletic, and I get to work with a lot of talented people, and especially from a fantasy perspective, and we have kind of the whole league covered with kind of updates all the time. So it's a good resource if you're a fantasy player, I think. Well,
Aaron, thanks for coming on again, buddy. We really appreciate you. And we look forward to working with you in the future as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm not gonna be able to get that CL thing out of my head now.
Glad we were able to stick with you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Thank you,
everyone.
All righty.
Glad to be an earworm for him.
Well, let's run through for the listeners while we're still on here.
Sure.
We got a little bit of understanding of what's happening with the team. Let's run through our projections. Just keep it simple for everybody. Go kind of player by player. We can skip Deshaun Watson now. Well, because I actually had to project it for a few games. I did.
So I just updated, Tyrod Taylor. I haven't put him into the rankings yet, so I don't have those rankings yet. But obviously, it's not gonna be pretty. It's not gonna be pretty. We'll leave it at that.
Davis Mills season. Let's go.
Okay, so let's say that Tyrod Taylor does play all 17 games.
No,
remember.
It's not gonna happen. They have to see what they have in the rookie. It's like, okay, I would say like we're probably looking at more like a 10-6 split now.
Okay,
10-7 split.
Let's talk about Tyrod Taylor for just a second, though. Tyrod Taylor, yeah, it's not great. Bob is right there, Josh. Tyrod Taylor in his career has averaged 30 passes per game. 30 passes per game. Now he has about a 25-30% target share, something ridiculous to the tight end. So we heard about Jordan Akins. Like, he's an absolute value right now. I only have him projected for an 11% target share. I may need to bump that up a ton. But looking at Tyrod Taylor, I have him projected for only 20 to 22 passing touchdowns just in initial projections. I'm also stalling for Billy to do anything if he wants to do it too. But 500.
No, I'm going to revisit this.
barely over 500 attempts in 17 games. And then 22 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Tyrod Taylor traditionally does not turn the ball over. I think that he'll be able to get the ball to Brandon Cooks. I have Brandon Cooks leading the team in touchdowns. I have Randall Cobb second right now in receiving touchdowns and David Johnson third. We saw how LaShawn McCoy absolutely exploded with Tyrod Taylor as the running quarterback for the Buffalo Bills many years ago. We also saw Chubb, and we saw who was the other? Carlos Hyde. When Tyrod Taylor was the starter, we saw the running backs really explode. So David Johnson we definitely need to keep in mind he was a player that missed 4 games last season, still caught the 24th most passes among running backs. So he missed a quarter of the season, still was a running back too. He's 5th among running backs with a 6.1% breakaway rate, 32nd in juke rate, 28th in evaded tackles. 28th in evaded tackles, like total tackles, and he missed a quarter of the season. He was 23rd in yards created. I don't think he's washed. Like,
so
yeah,
Bradley, I have a hypothetical situation here.
Sure.
What if Tyrod Taylor went in for medical procedure and got punctured lung, and Davis Mills starts the rest of the season?
We will not have a repeat of Justin Herbert. I'll tell you one thing. They would very much have to lean on.
Is this Groundhog's Day, Bradley? I know it's one of your favorite movies.
There are a few of my favorite movies. Yeah, Groundhog's Day is one of them. Groundhog's Day is so. I don't tell many people this. I celebrate Groundhog's Day privately. I do keep that to myself, but it is one of my favorite holidays. Special celebration. I Got You, Babe is it shows up on my most played songs at the end of the year, and I only play it on Groundhog's Day. So that tells you anything. But let's get back to David
for the podcast, by the way.
let's get back to David Johnson. He had the highest yards per carry average in a season. Okay. Even better than his stellar rookie year. And we remember how much he exploded with Bruce Arians. So all this while the Texans were the 6th worst graded among offensive run blocking in PFF. The narrative that David Johnson is dust is ridiculous. My concern is the competition for carries, but if David Johnson is the one on this, he's an absolute steal. He could be a back end running back 1 due to the pass catching.
So you saw the draft that I just did recently with David Hubbard. We didn't take a running back until like round 9, and it was not by design. It's just the way the board fell.
Well, it was very interesting. One of our most viewed podcasts. Yeah, sorry, Abib. We got the fire going.
So, nonetheless, though, we got David Johnson in round 11. I mean, after my talk here with Aaron,
if zero RB was the dark side,
zero RB is the dark side, and
you don't want to be the Jedi in this case.
I've never been there before, and here I am, got pushed out of my comfort zone, and here we are at round 9 with my first running back. So actually, it was actually kind of thrilling. I'm almost addicted now. So that's we're gonna see more podcasts down the line where we might definitely touch base on this build again and do something similar. But nonetheless, back to the Texans. David Johnson in round 11 now, I feel like is a steal. I mean, I'm looking at it, and
they've forgotten about him. That's ridiculous.
He had almost a career year last year.
I mean, he did. If he hadn't missed 4 games, we'd be talking about David Johnson running back 13. We'd be talking about David Johnson running back 14. We'd be talking about David Johnson back end running back 1. But he missed 4 games, and so the stats are just they're off. But he looked dynamic. I mean, game one against, I think they played the Chiefs week 1.
You and I have a different definition of dynamic, but yes, please continue.
Okay, let me define dynamic as a 6.1% breakaway rate, which was 5th among all running backs.
And he had a good season. I know. I'm just teasing here, but
but he was washed. He was old. He's still.
It's not a sexy pick. We're here in 2021. It's not a sexy pick, but you know what? It's sometimes those sexy picks are busts, but sometimes the players that aren't sexy still get you production. Like Russell Gage this year is another name, Bradley. He's not a sexy pick, but he's going to get opportunity. He's going to get target share. Texans now, David Johnson, not a sexy pick here in 2021. He's not the Arizona Cardinals David Johnson that people were drafting in round 1 of fantasy drafts
as the running back over one overall.
Yeah, we're now in the Houston Texans offense, less Deshaun Watson, where I personally believe they're going to be leaning heavily on the run game. They're going to be heavily leaning on him in the passing game because they have the likes of Randall Cobb, Chris Conley, Nico Collins, Kiki Kuti, Alex Erickson. I mean, you name it on
Chris Conley,
who we don't even have on our sheet. Oh, I actually do. 11%. Nonetheless, David Johnson's probably going to be involved. And I think we're starting to overlook him, and myself included.
Well, let's talk about his battery mate, Philip Lindsay. because Lindsey also missed 5. He missed 5 games last season, not just David Johnson's 4, but he only had 7 receptions. Okay, he only had 7. Yes, when you jump in the dark side, David Johnson is your hero. Yes, he's like the Darth Sidious, like, oh, the power.
But I mean, if you can hold the power, round 11, hold the power. I mean, YOLO, let's do it. I'm going to build another team with it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go right after it.
Beautiful. But I'm glad that Philip Lindsay, at least he got out of Denver because, number one, they signed him to like an original round tender. And if you remember, Philip Lindsay was an undrafted free agent. So original round of undrafted means paid nothing. So they said he convinced the Broncos, like, please, like, don't sign me. And
please let me go.
Like, rescind me. But here's the thing is, like, Drew Lock didn't like throwing to the running backs. Lindsey was 31st in juke rate, 42nd in evaded tackles, 27th in yards created per attempt. Like, these are all like metrics, sure, but he was 3rd overall in breakaway rate, and this is better than David Johnson. So you have an offensive line that's terrible. You have 2 of the best breakaway running backs in the NFL, and I think it's going to be pretty close to 50-50 pass to rush ratio because you've got Tyrod Taylor, who I've projected for like 120 rush attempts if he plays all 17 games. You have David Johnson and Philip Lindsay. I have all projected over 100 rushing yards. This is a team that the way they're going to win games this year, because every team wants to play for pride. They know that they're not good. They know that they don't have the talent, but they're playing for pride for a lot of these games. And the way they're going to try to win is by not letting the other team have the ball. And that's by running. And that's why they hit on David Johnson, Mark Ingram, Philip Lindsay. If someone fails, they've got a ton of backups.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm looking at my projections now, and I don't even know what to think. Like, after that conversation with Aaron here, I feel like I have to revisit this team and completely redo it. Like, I had Deshaun Watson projected for 8 games, and now taking that out of the equation, that changes this entire dynamic. I mean, just looking at my, real quick, looking at the running game, I think that's going to have to go up now with news here that there's zero expectation for Deshaun Watson from the Texans side. I mean, looking at my passing game, Jordan Akins, I had 11%. He says too low. Now I got to go back through and say, who do I have too high? Do I have Randall Cobb at 14% too high? Do I have Chris Conley at 11% too high? Do I have Nico Collins at 10% too high? You have to take from somewhere in that piece of the pie. And if he's expecting Jordan Akins to get more than 11, 12%, where are we taking that from?
Well, I think that like that cumulative 10, 11, et cetera percent, like, I don't think Nico Collins is going to be starting right off the bat. Like, it takes a while for 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks, et cetera, to, I know he was drafted up, like when you trade up for a player and they give the draft capital that they did, Nico Collins is going to be good. Like, he's got the draft capital, he's got the player prospect. If you go to Player Profiler, he's viewed as an alpha. He's got a lot of outstanding metrics. But I mean, let's be honest, it's going to take time for him to get integrated in the offense with a quarterback who sat out most of last season, and so most of the season before, and sat out most of the season before. It's just no. So I think that Jordan Akins will get a lot of love at the beginning of the season like he did last year.
Yeah, I'm looking at my projections now, and I think 10% is probably too high on Nico Collins. It's probably going to be more in that 7 to 8% range, and we're probably looking at a 13 to 14% for Jordan Akins. And looking at like best ball drafts and FFPC, like round 20, if you're in a classic, round 22, 23, 24.
Scott Fishbowl.
Yeah, Scott Fishbowl. These are steals now for somebody like Jordan Akins that has shown, touchdown upside in the past. And I'm not saying I'm going to go out and draft Jordan Akins here in FFPC right now, but I'm just saying it's worth me now, like, looking at it again and saying, did I miss something? What in my process did I miss? Do I need to go back and look at tape? Do I need to go back and look at my projections? What have I missed, and how can I make sure that I increase accuracy in my projections here for 2021?
Well, we'll get to Akins in just a little bit. We'll revisit him in a moment. But Mark Ingram is also on this team. And look, this is his 3rd team in the last 4 seasons. He only rushed 72 times last year for the Baltimore Ravens and had a mercy release. Like, it was almost like he was euthanized by the Baltimore Ravens. Yeah, his career was euthanized, at least. So I don't think I've been out on Mark Ingram since the day he signed with the Texans, and then with the signing of Rex Burkhead, with the signing of Philip Lindsay after Ingram. Like, I think you mentioned a couple months ago, Billy, that his cap hit is like $500,000. Yeah, they'll eat that for sure.
Yeah, it's you can swallow $500,000 in the NFL like it's a McDonald's cheeseburger for 99 cents or whatever it is these days. I haven't been there in a while, but I'm going to be honest with our listeners here. I don't feel comfortable now going over my projections here for this team because I feel like I have to completely redo them. I feel like they're inaccurate now, where I wanted to sit down and talk about my projections for this team after we talked with Aaron. But after that discussion, I feel like they're inaccurate. And I feel like it would be a disservice now to go through all my projections when I feel like I'm going to be redoing them within this week.
Well, sure. I don't think we need to go through specifics of all of those, but realistically, we expect Brandon Cooks to be the wide receiver 1, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close. And with a limited ceiling, let's talk about range of outcomes for Tyrod Taylor if he's going to be the starting quarterback. Tyrod Taylor, as I mentioned before, only 30 passes per game, and we expect a lot of those to go to the tight end. That means that the wide receiver 1, we remember Sammy Watkins having really good seasons as the one and only wide receiver on this team on the Buffalo Bills way back when with Tyrod Taylor. I think that Brandon Cooks can still put up 1,000 yards and 70 catches and 6 touchdowns in 16, 17 games. But like that's almost, it feels like a ceiling for Cooks. It feels like he might be able to get 50, 60, 70 yards and maybe every other game a touchdown possibly. But as we mentioned before, if they're going to run the ball a lot, if they're not going to pass the ball a lot, this is going to be a low volume offense, and Cooks has a very low ceiling relative to what other ceilings he may have had in previous years.
Yeah, I want to pull up real quick from our fantasy data website here. So make sure to, if you like the tools that we show here on the screen, make sure to tune in or when you are going on. They're going to be redoing the entire subscription page. So just wait maybe like a week and then touch base again. But if you use code FFF20, 20% off all of the fantasy data tools that are available here. It stacks on top of the coupons or the discounts that are already on the website. So it's just a benefit to you. But now that that's out of the way, Tyrod Taylor here. I mean, look at this. This is disgusting. I'm sorry. I can't get on board with this.
3,000 passing yards, 3,000 passing yards, 2,800 passing yards. And he's played 14 games. It's not like he played 10, 12 games.
Yeah, but that was 4 years ago. That was 5 years ago. That was 6 years ago. He is now, what is he?
31.
Yeah. 31 years old right here. 31 years old. I mean, we're not going to see that. I mean, he just got stabbed in the lung by a doctor and Herbert took over and we have,
his career high is 20 passing touchdowns, and I have him projected for about that in 17 games. It's ugly. It's real ugly.
I feel like this type of passing volume that we saw here is not the type of passing volume. So look back here, 8 games here in 2019. I mean, look at the difference, right? And I know that he's not starting and all the attempts aren't there, but look at the averages drop down. I mean, I just don't think that we're going to see 2015, 2016, 2017 Tyrod Taylor. I don't. I think we're going to see more of what we saw at, Cleveland, 2018 Tyrod Taylor. I just don't expect him to be the saving grace of the Houston Texans. I mean, this is going to be one hell of a year for the Texans. When I say one hell of a year, I mean, that's going to suck. And they're going to be, he's a top 5 pick. That was generous. It's top 2 picks. I don't think there's any scenario that they're outside the top 2 here. And that's, I'm keeping it real, right? Like, there is no possible way
lies detected.
Yeah, there is no possible way that they're outside, pick 2, pick 3 in this next year's draft. And I just think that they start leaning on Davis Mills sooner rather than later.
I mean, they got to see what they got, right?
Now, Josh has a good point. He's 31 and has 1 lung.
Okay. I think we've hit on the wide receivers a lot. We think that Randall Cobb probably is going to fit into the slot, competing with Kiki QT. Nico Collins might get, he's an alpha. He's 6'4", but Chris Conley might get some veteran work. Dante Moncrief he couldn't catch the ball with Pittsburgh. I mean, nobody could except Juju. So I think really this is a fire up your Jordan Akins. Akins last year, despite missing all of his games and Darren Fells still being there, was 24th in touchdown tight end receptions, 24th in tight end yards, 7th in tight end target separation. He's able to get away from defenders, 19th in yards per route run, 9th in yards per target, and he was tied with Waller for that stat, by the way. So, being in good company, he in a part-time role, including injuries, Akins showed that he at least has something there. 12th in tight end hog rate, 26th in snap share, 16th in fantasy points per target. I think that Jordan Akins is an interesting tight end 2 possibility.
Yeah, it definitely opens my eyes. Like I said, I'm gonna have to retouch on these projections. I'm not comfortable. I mean, tight end 2 is definitely within the realm of possibilities now. Who knows? I mean, when he's been on the field, he's been kind of touchdown sneaky, right? He's
him and Fells. So with Fells gone, they're just gonna throw it to Akins, right?
Yeah, and then if you don't have Nico on the field, I mean, he's really the only big body. I mean, Brandon Cooks is not a tall guy. Randall Cobb is not a tall guy. I mean, Kiki Kuti is not a tall guy. So who is their red zone threat? It's going to be Akins. It's going to be DJ. It's going to be, these players that are being overlooked now in drafts. And man, I feel like I failed as an analyst.
I mean,
on
Charles
this team when I projected him.
Clay, the starting tight end for the 3 years that Tyrod Taylor was the starting quarterback in Buffalo, he was on the reg a back end tight end 1. Like points per game for tight ends. He would always show up. It wouldn't be, as we mentioned, he wouldn't be a sexy pick, but Jordan Akins very much can fill in that role, especially there's a wide range of outcomes what can happen with this quarterback. And we haven't even mentioned my boy Jeff Driscoll, who is also signed by the Texans as quarterback depth. So, I mean, anything can happen. This is spin the roulette wheel, throw what you can against the wall, and that's what we're getting. Yeah, we are digging deep, Josh. Charles Clay. How about that?
And so for those of you who haven't seen Bradley's dynasty rosters, when we start talking about these players, you have a better understanding of Bradley's dynasty rosters. It's like my love for Corey Davis. It just, it falters to a point, but eventually we win.
Eventually. All right. Billy, we had, Aaron on and talked about a little bit about the Texans for the now. What about the Texans for the future? Like we are assuming that they'll get a top 2 pick. They probably will draft a quarterback. But then what do you do?
And that's what he's saying. Like, you have to see what Davis Mills has before you make the decision. So that's why I think we're going to see more Davis Mills than 7 games, 6 games. I think we may even see now half a season from Davis Mills to just see if he has anything, if they can address other positions. Because let's be honest here, this team has many holes. And if they're able to address other positions, if Davis Mills is the answer for 1 or 2 years, then Davis Mills is the answer for 1 or 2 years. Top 1 or 2 pick, maybe not likely because they're able to take that quarterback, but if they're able to trade back and acquire more capital, we may see Davis Mills for 1 or 2 years. So I think it all comes down to his play and what we're going to see here in 2021.
And they may, address the offensive line. They may address the defense. We talked about PFF rating their offensive line is terrible, for run blocking in particular. But I mentioned Laramie Tunsil. I think he had given up like the most quarterback hits or something. Oh, no, it wasn't that. He was the most flagged left tackle last season. So, I mean, even that trade is backfiring.
Yeah. So for Percy, who just joined us, he asked if not going to be laughing when Deshaun Watson comes back. We just had Aaron Reiss on, and he does not expect, nor does the Houston organization, he expects to have Deshaun Watson back here in 2021. That's what we're discussing. So it is a little bit of a laughing matter because we're looking at our projections. We're looking at 2021 season, and we have a lot of questions now, especially as analysts and people who have been projecting this team, who had a trouble projecting it in the beginning. Now that we have a little bit more clarity, I think it's not necessarily a laughing matter, but it is definitely time for us to reevaluate our projections and reevaluate our process and fine tune those things. Well, anything else, Bradley, before we say goodbye?
Go out and draft your David Johnson. Come to the dark side.
Join Josh on the dark side. 0 running back truthers. Dave Johnson is the unsung hero. All jokes aside, please join us back here this coming Friday. That is going to be Friday the 16th here at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern. I am going to be debating with Josh Larkey in regards to Cam Akers on the Rams. We're also going to be covering the Rams. So Cam Akers debate, though, because not sure if you noticed or not, but Twitter kind of exploded. We had this debate on Twitter. We're bringing it live to the Fantasy Football Fanalists, presented by Fantasy Data live stream. Bradley's going to be the moderator here with non-biased opinions, even though I already know that he is not a Cam Akers truther. Just throwing that out there.
Sam
Bradley.
Cakers. Sam
Cakers. That's right.
Just so I'm, not going to be biased.
But I have quite the notes here, Bradley. I'm not sure if you had a chance to take a look at them.
I did take a look at them, and Larky better be prepared because you spitting some facts, and if he's not prepared,
from his own analytics,
they are, and that's
his
what you
website.
need to use. That's what you need to use to defeat these Sam Cakers truthers, is their own words against them. So I am interested to see, how he rebuts a lot of those. Because I think that's going to be a real crux of the debate, because both sides, I think, are going to be very passionate. We've seen very strong Cam Akers truthers in the draft. He's been a consensus top first-round pick in many, many drafts. I will be very interested to see a justification of ADP or draft capital, or even a projection for the future. So our listeners can look forward to that debate on Friday at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific.
I do have an answer for his debate and what he brings forth to the table. And it's just one simple click. Every time that I don't agree with it, it's a buzzer. And we're going to do it like at least 3 times in the first minute, just to throw him off his game. So if you're listening, Larky, be ready. It's happening. You're going to get the buzzer at least once or twice. And I'm excited, actually. I have a golf tournament. I didn't even realize that I scheduled it on the same day as my 3-day golf tournament. That's day 2 of the golf tournament. I may or may not be drinking that day. Nonetheless, I can still read my own notes, so I made sure to complete those prior.
If not, I will read your notes for you, Billy. I will transcribe.
If I get on, you realize I'm too incapacitated. Bradley may be taking over this debate.
So Billy would actually say that Sam Cakers is not that good of a running back.
I will definitely. Okay. I won't go that far. I think he's a good running back. I think he's overrated, but I do think that he has a bright future ahead of him. And we'll get into that more on Friday. But nonetheless, make sure to tune into that show here. It's going to be Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific.
Gonna have a lot of fun. Gonna have a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to have a Manhattan or 2 during the show or after the show. I'll have a few beers while I'm playing golf as well. So it's going to be a fun debate. I'm looking forward to discussing Cam Cakers, or how do you say it again? Cakers.
Sam Cakers with Josh Larkey on Friday on the FF Analyst podcast presented by Fantasy Data. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you all back here on Friday at 6. Have a good evening.